What's up folks, Crush SG here with my thoughts on the recently posted official update from Mihoyo surrounding Zhongli and the Geo element. Now let's get this part out of the way first. I have never been happier to be wrong or to have downplayed something. I had hoped for a buff but felt we needed to temper our expectations, and as it turns out, perhaps no tempering was required. Maybe. Yes, maybe is my comfort zone when it comes to such things. Call me pessimistic, but when you've gamed long enough, and especially in recent years, taking everything with a huge grain of salt kind of becomes second nature. No buff is 100% real to me till I see the numbers on my monitor, on my account, on my characters, on the live server. That being said, an official announcement is about as good as it gets, so be happy and let's go over what Mihoyo just announced. First off, we have the changes for Zhongli slated for the 1.3 beta test. His talent Dominance of Earth is being reworked to include HP scaling for his entire kit. His normal attack, charge attack and plunge attacks gain 1.39% HP scaling, his pillar, resonance and hold mode of his E skill gain 1.9% HP scaling, and his burst retains its original 33% scaling. We also have changes to the hold mode of his E skill. The quick version is that holding his E skill will now create both a pillar and a shield, and the interruption resistance is greatly increased from what it is now. There are also changes to his shield, but I'll get to that in a bit. Next we have an adjustment to the Geo team Resonance. Previously it gave a 15% increase in damage whilst protected by a shield, and post adjustment it will now give 15% shield strength, and while protected by a shield damage is increased by 15%, and dealing damage to enemies decreases Geo resistance by 20% for 15 seconds. And finally we have the adjustments to Geo shields in general. As everyone knows, any element based shield typically has 250% absorption against that specific element. With the new adjustment, all Geo shields will now have 150% absorption against physical and elemental damage instead. Alright, before we break this down, I just want to do my due diligence and direct your attention to this one sentence. Test version not indicative of final product. This is Mihoyo basically saying, yeah, this is what's coming, but in the unlikely event we choose to change something, don't say we didn't warn you about it. Okay, let's do this. This is a huge buff for both Zhongli and the Geo element folks. Will it make Geo rival the amplification reaction elements? Well, no, but it sure goes a long way to leveling the playing field, if I can say at least that much. In fact, I'd say we're getting a buff in almost every department that I felt Geo was lacking in, except for the crystallized reaction. Come on Mihoyo, finish the job, give crystallize a tiny little nudge. You know crystallize is a joke right now, just do it. Anyway, let's break down how much of a buff all this really is, starting with the HP scaling. Now I know 1.39% and 1.9% seem like tiny numbers, but don't be misled by it. Like I said in my Albedo Thoughts video, having damage scale in this manner adds a flat value to damage sources, and therefore benefits smaller damage sources much more significantly. And as far as Zhongli goes, everything other than his burst is considered a small damage source. Let's look at some math. Using all level 6 skills and using my Zhongli's current gear, I have worked out 3 different gear sets. Full attack gear, which is what I'm wearing now, HP DPS gear, which is the exact same gear with all the percent attack stats swapped for percent HP except the headpiece and the goblet. And lastly, we have full HP gear, which is again the same gear with percent HP on everything. And these are the respective stats as well as HP values. What we have below are all the modifiers for Zhongli's kit, with before and after values including a percent gain for easy understanding. The only thing worth noting is I took the average of all 9 hits in Zhongli's normal attack chain, because the HP scaling would apply to each individual hit, including the 4 separate hits on his 5th attack. Of course, his burst doesn't get a buff in scaling, so the number remains the same. As you can see, we have green across the board, and as expected, the buff affects the smaller damage sources much more significantly than the larger sources. Another takeaway here is that percent attack still scales better for damage than percent HP across the board, and this is because the buff also affects attack builds too. It still gains that additional HP scaling from its HP pool just like other builds. However, the significance of this buff is that it will make going for HP far less punishing in the damage department than it is right now, and it evens out the damage disparity between the different builds, particularly in the normal attack and pillar resonance departments, making full HP resonance builds much more viable. More importantly, this is an overall buff to Zhongli's damage output, period, regardless of build, and the buff is not insignificant. Okay, moving on, we have changes to his E hold skill, and this is more of a buff to compensate for the long cast time than anything. Having a long cast time just for a shield made the skill very clunky, but now having it cast both a pillar and a shield with an alleged significant boost in interruption resistance makes the skill much less clunky and more appealing to use. This is a very reasonable change since it seems they won't budge on the cast time of the hold itself. And we have the final two changes, and I gotta be honest folks, as a Noelle main, I'm reading this and it just made me smile. Let's talk about the shield buff first. This is a much needed buff in my opinion. Lots of folks say Zhongli's shield is great because it is huge, but I think the fact that it is a Geo Shield makes it the worst kind of shield currently, and that's what makes Diona so viable even though her shield is considerably weaker than Zhongli's. There just aren't enough sources of incoming Geo damage to fully utilize the current 250% absorption to Geo damage. Cryo damage on the other hand, which is what Diona's shield is a pretty common damage source I would say. With this new change however, both Noelle and Zhongli's shields effectively gain 50% more strength to everything, making Geo shields conclusively the strongest shields in the game, bar none. This also means that going hybrid DPS or even full attack on Zhongli will still bring very respectable shield strength with it, making it even more viable for teams that don't require super large shields from a full HP Zhongli. If anything, this change further reinforces the point I made in my Zhongli review that you probably won't need to go full HP on Zhongli for his shield to be sufficient for all available content. And finally, we have the Geo Resonance buff. 15% damage increase? We already have that. 15% shield strength buff? I'll take it. 20% Geo resistance reduction? Yes, s'il vous plaît. This is possibly the single most important buff to me personally because I run 2 Geos on Team 1. Resist reduction is in its own multiplicative category, separate from other bonus damage sources. So a 20% reduction literally means you gain 20% more total damage to targets. No spreadsheet required for this because it's simple. If your Noelle is currently hitting for 15k crits, in the future you'll be dealing 18k crits. I assume most of you have seen those insane Ningguang DPS clips floating around, right? Add 20% to that. All those numbers you saw in the Zhongli spreadsheet earlier? Add 20% to that. This is a really nice buff to Geo characters across the board, and if I may say so, a very much needed buff indeed. Alright, to wrap things up, once again, I'm still cautiously optimistic at this point for reasons I explained at the start of the video. Though to be clear, I am indeed very happy to see these changes, because if anything it tells me the developers are actually aware of the shortcomings Geo has as an element. This is something I wasn't so sure about up till now. And all that's left is for it to make it through the beta test and onto the live servers. The wait is not gonna be fun. 1.2 hits on the 23rd, right? So that makes 1.3, sometime early February? Probably the Chinese New Year patch looking at the date? We'll see. Anyway, that's it for today folks. As always, thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't, crush that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.